You're listening
to the CD Baby DIY
Musician
Podcast.
Hey there, and welcome to another edition of the CD Baby DIY Musician Podcast. My name is Kevin. This is episode number 41, a Roundtable edition. So, of course, joining me is Chris and Robert. Hey, guys.
Hey. Hello.
Well, how's it going? The year's winding down. Anything exciting going on? I know, Chris, you just released a new album.
And now I'm starting the next one.
Already?
Right.
Are you in the studio with the next one?
I am.
Oh,
already.
my goodness
I don't know if I would recommend that to our listeners, to start a new album the week you release another album.
This man is a workhorse, let me tell you.
Well, I figure I'm not going to be on the road during Christmas time, so what better time to get productive?
Yeah, that's true.
That's true. My only question with that is don't you find that maybe a year later when you're actually releasing the album that you might want to go back and retweak those songs? Or
Oh, always. I always want to go back and retweak, but
it's never finished.
Never finished.
You just got to put it out and move on.
But I was in attendance at your album release show, and it was a fine show.
Thank you.
You did a good job.
It was fun.
So one thing I wanted to mention, I forgot to mention on our last roundtable, it is the holiday season, and Ariel from Cyber PR, she asked us if we'd pass along that they're doing a fundraiser to help various charities this Christmas season. So she asked if we'd pass that along for you to check it out. If you're looking for a way to help out others in need this season, check it out. So, one thing I wanted to mention to you guys, I am now on Twitter, which has been an interesting experience. So if anyone cares and wants to...
Did you sign up after that interview with her?
She was one of the people that kind of made me think, I should give it a shot. But also, I'm part of a crew of people here at CD Baby that are trying to enhance our social networking presence. So I figured I better have a grasp for all of them.
And if you don't know who Ariel is, of Ariel Publicity, or if you don't know what Twitter is, listen to Ariel's interview. I think that was 29, was it?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, just check out that interview. It's a good one. While we're talking about Ariel, she has a newsletter email list that she does a lot about social networking, and she has a big article about Twitter, so it's a good one. But if you're interested in seeing my humorous and witty posts on Twitter, my username is just kbrunner, BREUNER. And I left a witty one this morning. I have to say I was proud of it.
Oh my gosh.
I'm sure it's just nonstop thrills following you on Twitter.
That's right.
Find out what Kevin's up to today.
Exactly. So yeah, if you're interested, I'll be talking about music, life,
vanilla lattes,
my trip to Disneyland coming up, our daily trips to the coffee shop here. So anyway, let's get into some news.
CD Baby.
CD Baby Music.
All right, here are a couple news headlines that caught my attention since we last convened around the round table. And here we go. With all the news about the falling economy, apparently there's still money to be made in touring. Bon Jovi has beaten out competition from Bruce Springsteen and Madonna to secure the highest grossing tour of 2008.
Bon Jovi?
The Lost Highway International Trek brought in $210 million. Just ahead of Springsteen's Magic Tour, which grossed $204 million, and Madonna in a distant third with $162 million. But I think she's still going to be okay.
I didn't know people still listen to Bon Jovi seriously.
YouTube uploaders can now find audio from a number of sources, including YouTube itself. The video giant offers a suite of pre-licensed content through its homegrown Audio Swap, a tool that easily layers audio onto uploaded video content. The library now includes Rumblefish, a repository of roughly 25,000 clips from independent artists and producers. Through this partnership, the YouTube audience will have easy access to the same extensive list of premier licensed Rumblefish tracks that professional industry media creators use for making their videos. This week, Technipedia posted its guide to social media etiquette, where they outline how people use and abuse the social media sites like Facebook, MySpace, and Twitter. According to Technipedia, social media mimics real relationships in many cases. And they ask, would you do the following with real face-to-face relationships? And a few of them are: jump on the friendship bandwagon without properly introducing yourself, consistently talk about yourself and promote only yourself with regard for those around you. There's somebody here at CD Baby that does that. Randomly approach a friend you barely talk to and simply ask for favors repeatedly. And it goes on and on. It's definitely worth checking out. And we'll put a link to it on the podcast website at cdbabypodcast.com for the post for this show. So I would check it out and read it. It's a good one. So those are the news headlines I found interesting.
I know we've said it 100 times, but I just went to our the CD Baby podcast MySpace the other day to approve a whole bunch of friend requests. And there were probably about 5 or 6 in there that were like, check out my music, check out my music, check out my music. I'm just like, I don't know who you are. I don't want to check out your music. You know, like, I'll approve your friend request, but chances are that'll be the end of our relationship right there.
Well, and their whole guide to social networking etiquette, it was interesting. It was very extensive, too. They break it down by individual social networking sites. So here's what they say the etiquette for Facebook is. Here's the etiquette for MySpace and Twitter and some other ones. I thought they went a little bit overboard. Like,
right.
They basically boil it down to, if you don't know the person, have a personal relationship with them, don't bother.
Right.
But, I mean, it's like, that defeats the purpose of it. I'll just email them then. Yeah.
Right. Especially from a musician standpoint, they're kind of like business relationships. So they don't have to always be super intimate.
Yeah, so there was some good tips on there. I highly recommend reading it because I know most musicians are breaking all of the ones, most of them on there. But it's a few good things to remind. It might actually help you tweak your approach to social network sites. And
I would be considered the Facebook curmudgeon because I can't stand when people nudge me and do all that silly stuff. I'm like, oh, just leave me alone.
Well, I don't know if that would be acceptable etiquette if you're not actually communicating with them as well. You know, I mean, because on Facebook, there's all these little things you can do. You can throw a snowball at somebody. You can, buy them a drink or send them a plant, and all these virtual things that I'm too old to understand. But
I'm just like, just send me an email.
apparently I have no real friends because nobody ever does any of that to me.
I think I officially can throw snowballs now, so I'll throw one at you.
Oh, okay, cool. I look forward to that. Oh, and speaking of the touring, with Bon Jovi being the highest grossing tour, I found myself wondering what decade I was in this week because Bon Jovi was the highest grossing tour. Guns N' Roses has a new album. Just here in the office the other day, I heard someone talking about how much they love Every Rose Has Its Thorn by Poison.
Whoa.
And then yesterday, I got into somebody's car just to go to lunch, and they turned on the radio, and Don't Cry by Guns N' Roses was on the radio. And I'm like, what is going on here?
And
Coming back.
So the 80s are back, I guess.
I mean, no offense to Bon Jovi fans out there, but like, I thought you just enjoyed Bon Jovi in an ironic sense. I really thought that America was over their obsession with Bon Jovi. Apparently not.
Well, apparently not.
The other thing I was thinking about those figures is probably Bon Jovi did 40 dates. Bruce Springsteen probably did 20 and made as much. Madonna probably did 3 shows.
Yeah.
And made.
Actually, I think from looking at it, I think Madonna actually, because I cut some of the info out for brevity's sake, but they were saying that Madonna seemed like she was touring more around the world. And so, because they kind of made it like she only made this, but even though she was touring constantly around the world.
Oh, I didn't know she did that anymore. I thought she was just sort of like special dates here and there.
I think in America she does, but outside of the U.S., I don't know. But to me, the thing highlights that there's still plenty of money to be made, definitely with live shows. If people are willing to pay that much.
Especially for an aging rock star.
And to me, partly why I think that some of those aging rock stars still having that concert attendance is because that was the era when it was like this big show, the concert. And I think the pendulum swung the other way, and a lot of people lost I don't know, just they don't put together a show, and so people aren't as inspired to come see them perform. It's not a performance. It's playing of your songs. So I don't know. This coming new year, we're going to get cover some of those topics. So be looking for it. Well, our last episode number 40, we talked to Alex Steiniger from In Music We Trust, publicist. And Chris, he's your publicist. And we've heard about all the publicity you've received. Yeah, he kind of gave you a few props there.
Yeah, he was doing his job, plugging me.
That's right.
Thanks, Alex.
You must be paying him well. But I thought it was a great interview, and to me, more so than the publicity part, that I enjoyed the part where he was talking about the idea of developing your story, because it's something that we've been talking about on this podcast since episode 2 with Lisa Lapine, who that's a big focus of how she helps artists. And if you haven't heard episode 2, I would highly recommend you go back and listen to it. It's a good one. We'll probably have to replay that one again.
Yeah.
And I know we're going to get Lisa on the show again. But when Alex was talking about, going to the press, I think so many artists and musicians, like you were saying, Robert, with MySpace, they just listen to my music, and they totally disassociate any sort of story or interest or anything from it. It's just a sales pitch. And to me, you're just not going to get people's attention that way. And a publicist whose job is to get the attention of the media, what if you take what he said and go work on developing your story, you're going to definitely improve your chances of getting written about, because if you don't have a story, they're not going to write about you.
The thing that it was reminding me of was basically when he mentioned that I was saying, I don't feel like I have a story, and I'm a pretty well-adjusted guy. I'm not on drugs. I don't live on the streets. There didn't seem to be any drama. So he just said, well, here's how I usually begin the process. I'm going to ask you, 20 or 30 questions. And they ranged from all different kinds of questions. And he said, just sort of run your mouth off and I did this writing. It was by email, but basically just spill everything out that you want to, and I'll sift through it. Because there will be a story that you'll tell me in there, but you just might not know what it is. So that was kind of cool, and I think everyone could do that. Just run your mouth off and then have your friends look at it and say, well, this is the most interesting part. Make that your story.
That's pretty cool. Do you still have the questions that he asked?
I've got them somewhere on email, but
maybe we can drag them up for our listeners. It would be kind of a cool thing for anyone out there listening to practice, is to sort of pour all that information out and see what actually comes of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the one artist he talked about besides you, the guy who hired these big name players to play on his record, and he spent most of his time trying to focus, hey, these big name players are on my record, but he presented it in a way that was like really kind of pretentious and, I'm just some rich person that can afford big name people. But when he really told the story like it was, and how it was kind of like almost like a musical journey for this person, it was interesting. It made you want to hear the music. But if it was just like, hey, so-and-so played on my record, which I see all the time here at CD Baby in people's bios, and it doesn't really engage you in the story of the album. If you've got these big name people on your album, obviously there's a reason why. It's not just because, well, hopefully it's not just because, you just rounded up the most expensive people you could find.
But yeah, once it became like a financial sacrifice, and this guy threw it all away to be able to afford these session dudes, then it's like, oh, that's pretty cool.
And it was these session dudes because they meant something to his whole musical journey. It was people that he really respected. So the idea of this guy, giving it all up to be able to do an album with people he really respected, that was interesting. And people go, I want to pay attention to that. And so I thought that was a really good exercise in how to make something engaging. I mentioned on the last roundtable, I was at several music conferences recently, and probably a good portion of the books people were selling had the word secrets or secrets revealed in the title. Secret. And it's like, apparently they're not, because if anyone can buy a book and get the secrets, people still wouldn't be buying books to get the secrets.
Right. I mean, it's a cliched way of whetting people's appetite, but they're trying to tell a story. They're trying to engage you from the beginning so that you dig deeper.
But what I was going to say is that, to me, this is the one true secret that no one talks about, because it's not something that you can't go to MySpace and create an interesting story. Like, I can go to MySpace and you can tell me how to spam 1,000 people to get 20 friends, and then maybe one of them will buy an album. But you can't tell somebody, you can't rewrite somebody's life to make it interesting. And, you know, Alex mentioned how he used to just read the paper to, you know, kind of see how they spun stories and how they would, you know, get your attention and take something that was silly, the whole meth watch thing that cracked me up, which was hysteria here in Portland for a while.
It's true. Well, they'd have these really horrible, provocative pictures that they put in the paper and stuff of, like, you know, like a mother or something looking all frail and sickly with marks on her arms, and it would be huge full-page ad.
My favorite was the map of Portland where they had all the red dots of all the meth houses.
Oh, that was a good one.
But the whole thing about developing a story to me is the one real secret that most artists just don't spend any time on. I happened to be on Twitter this past week, and I just searched CD Baby Podcast just to see what would come up. And it was funny, someone was twittering about the Lisa Lapine thing, and they put in the quote that you can't tell a compelling story if you don't know your story. That right there, I mean, I think sums up what musicians should be spending a lot of their time thinking about outside of writing good music. Because you can spend all day on MySpace, you may get some friends, you can do all these things, but it's not going to build a fan base that has any sort of longevity. You might trick a few people into buying your album or whatever, but if you want people to really latch onto you as an artist and your music and have some sort of connection with it, you got to be able to convey that story.
And, you know, go and read, like, other, you know, read the bios on musicians' pages or of bands that you like. A lot of times they've already taken the time to develop those stories, and that's what their one sheets are. That's what their, you know, bio pages on their websites are about. And, you know, some may do it better than others, but it's, you know, besides looking, you know, to the newspapers or even the movies to see how a good story is written, a lot of times successful musicians out there do have a pretty compelling story. And that's a way to maybe pick up on it. Because just because you may seem like you don't have a story doesn't mean there's not something there.
Yeah, and the one thing that, you know, Lisa talked about is, like, the music being the last thing that's important, and just the idea that in order to get somebody to the final point of listening to your music, you've got to entice them somehow. To me, you know, the interesting story, I think about all the artists that maybe I might gravitate to. It's usually because I find something interesting about them, or see other people writing about, like, people that are on NPR, people that, you know, the local paper writes about, you know, local artists from our area. And I'm not even talking about the music section. I'm talking about like the living section or the life section, where they find some interesting angle. Half the time it's not having to do with, hey, this is the best album ever. It has to do with something like the story, like that guy giving up everything in order to pursue music and try to record the album with some of these guys that have been really influential with him. And those are the kind of things that get people talking and get people drawn into who you are as an artist. We're definitely going to have Lisa back on, and in this coming new year, I want to dedicate more shows to actually trying to pinpoint that a little more, because you see so many artists that get press that aren't that great, and they have a great story, though. And you see all these great artists that have amazing albums that don't get anywhere, and it's because they don't know how to convey who they are beyond just, my album's the best album ever.
And I don't know if this is really the time or place to bring this up, but going along with creating your own story, you sort of have, there's a certain amount of fabrication that's involved in sort of creating a certain version of yourself. And I think Lisa talked a little bit about that, but there's sort of two ends of the spectrum. You have people who just go way too far into the fantasy land with their story, and they say, you know, I've had artists tell me, you know, like, I'm the one who fused rock and hip hop, you know, like, I'm the one who you know, like, they create this sort of mythological figure of themselves being this sort of revolutionary character, superhero of music, which, you know, is so far-fetched that you realize it's just not true, and you're gonna write them off. But then you also have, like, a character like Bob Dylan, who, you know, was always sort of bending the truth a little bit about his mythology, but he's always doing it just enough to keep you curious and be like, whoa, he really worked on a rodeo? Or, whoa, he rode boxcars? Wait, what? What's true? What's false?
And that's the thing why I think it's like the exercise that Alex had you do, Chris, about, just answering a whole bunch of questions is useful because it is a story.
Yeah.
It is something where you're telling some things that, maybe something that was just a really small thing. Could have been a day in your, lifespan, but it's something unique or interesting.
And to tell a good story, you have to add a certain amount of drama. You have to put the facts in the right order to create tension, to create resolution. And, there's a little bit of magic in there.
And, for people that are interested in trying to, develop that, there's several podcasts that I listen to that have nothing to do with music in general, but they're all about telling stories. And one of them's the Moth podcast. It's just a show where people stand up and basically tell a story.
That's a great podcast.
And it's definitely interesting. I've heard people on there that are, they're great. Some other people are so-so, but the way they go about it, and when you find yourself engaged in the story, you just kind of analyze it a little bit, what they're doing. Also, This American Lifestyle is a great podcast. They're just telling stories, and highly recommend those two. It's not that hard to find them in the iTunes library.
They're like the most popular podcasts.
They're the ones. They're all over the place. So, but
I was just going to mention the one thing about that I thought Alex said that was really valuable was that musicians should remember that music writers get paid to be writers first and music fans second. So I think that's a reason why it's not really merit-based. If they can write a story quicker on a less worthy album, they'll probably do that.
Yeah.
If they can get 250 words in 15 minutes as opposed to really digging into a great album and having to fish the story out.
Or if they can get a really interesting article out of a bad band.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's, I think when we interviewed Amy, who was the music editor at the weekly paper here in town, she mentioned stuff like that where, they get inundated with bands, and sometimes it just comes down to, what can I write a story about easily? What grabs my attention? It doesn't even, they may not even listen to the disc,
Right.
Because it's not necessarily about their opinion on whether or not this is a valuable piece of art. It's a matter of they've got to fill paper. They got pages to fill, and if they don't fill it, those pages will be taken away from them.
I mean, if all you can say about someone is they're a singer-songwriter, like gag me with a spoon.
But a couple episodes back, I mentioned that when we were talking about how we discover music, I mentioned that I've just been kind of turned off by magazines like Spin. I got a free subscription to it. And I think that's partly why, is because I just saw this litany of bands that is like, they weren't doing anything the way they're presenting them in their magazine to make it an interesting story. It was like a whole nother magazine filled with, this is the latest, greatest band from New York and they sound like this. And it's like, I don't care, give me some sort of interesting story. But I think also we've become, especially with the music industry, very fast food oriented. So there's not many people really hanging around long in order to tell someone's story, like an ongoing artist.
A good example, and this totally worked on me, and I know it worked on a lot of people, the White Stripes.
The sister.
They played it purposely ambiguous whether they were brother and sister or a husband and wife or boyfriend and girlfriend, and there was always press about it, and they called each other sister and brother on stage, and they just caused all sorts of conjecture and also just silly stuff. They just wore, one wore red and one wore white, or they had a combination of the two. So like when you talk about the White Stripes, you're like, yeah, they're this weird band. You don't know if they're married or brother and sister, and they always just wear white or red. And that is really interesting.
Well, and them, I was not a fan of their first band, but I got sucked into some of those conversations as well. So, I mean, the idea of doing something that's intriguing definitely gets people talking and want to dig in deeper. We'll be talking more about that in the coming year. Developing a story, not the White Stripes.
Whole White Stripes podcast.
White Stripes. All right, well, let's get into some phone calls.
CD Baby Podcast.
Message line
206-426-5683.
The number you have dialed
206-426-5683.
Hey, this is Jacqueline Bradley, and I have had so many crazy experiences as a musician. I think it just comes with the territory. I mean, I was Danny Bonaducci's assistant, which you'd think would be my craziest story, but it's not. I was doing a gig in my hometown of Cleveland, and I was opening for Sponge and Seven Mary 3, which I was really excited about. And I was getting ready and had everything in line, doing my vocal warm-ups, and I get a call from my guitarist. And he told me that he wouldn't be coming. And, of course, I started to freak out. I had a show in an hour and a half. And what happened was he was working at a car dealership, and his boss told him he couldn't leave. And if he left, he would be losing his job. Well, who am I to tell him to lose his job for me? So I had to call the club and let them know that my guitarist wouldn't be showing up. My drummer was already there, and I was mortified, but they understood. They had the act going on before me do a double set. And needless to say, I'm not playing with that guitarist any longer. But the moral of that story is make sure that your band, whoever they may be, has taken enough work, and you might want to get it in writing. This is Jacqueline Bradley. I'm on CD Baby. My music is much better than this guitarist was at showing up, so check me out. Thanks.
Hey, CD Baby podcast. This is Justin Lamoure with Midwest Dilemma. One of the issues that we ran into while we're recording in the studio and ended up, we cut about 23 different tracks for different instruments on the album, and all of which were following my guitar and vocals. That was kind of the first thing we laid down as kind of a scratch track. We didn't have any clicks or no drums or anything. Down the line, I realized that those takes that I did were really great, so I wanted to keep the original scratch tracks. So we got everything wrapped up, and we went into the mixing studio, which was a different studio, and we were listening to it, and the engineer said, "Man, this music's great, but the vocal and the guitar, there's major phasing and there's major issues." So we ended up having to decide if we're gonna, it's gonna be okay, or we're gonna have to re-record. So we ended up mastering, and we get done with mastering. I get home, and I realized how bad the phasing really was. So we ended up taking it all the way back to the recording phase. But when we went back to the studio where we were recording, found out that he wasn't available, and another studio wasn't available. So we ended up re-recording guitar and vocals in a cold basement. We're here in Nebraska, so I think it was about 20 degrees in the basement, and we could see our breath, and I think all of us were sick, and we were able to get back into a good studio and wrap everything up, and I think the lesson is never look at anything as a scratch track. Anytime you have a recording that you're doing, you want to make sure that if you're going to keep it for any reason, make sure that that the take that you have is the one that you want to keep. So thank you guys very much. Bye.
Hi, my name is Lanie Mendelson, and I just released a healing music CD called Heartstrings on the CD Baby. I've been writing music for documentaries for many years, and many years ago I was asked to write some music for a documentary dealing with how to do basket weaving, and the producer wanted the music to be that of sultry humidity. How those two went together, I will never know, but that's what the producer wanted. So I went out to the country and sat under a tree. It was July, hot as could be, and tried to think sultry humidity. Needless to say, I came back with no sultry humidity, but I had a lot of chigger bites. I think if I were to do that music now, I could do it, but I sure still remember those chigger bites. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Hi, this is Charles Fortius. I just signed up for a CD Baby account. I wanted to tell you my story. Well, it all started when I fell in love with a girl named Catherine at my local community college, and I started writing songs every single day. No, I'm just kidding. I'm real passionate about music. It's my favorite thing to do, and I write a song every day when I can. And I'm so happy to be on CD Baby because you guys are great. 92% of the sales. That's pretty damn good to me. Sounds pretty damn good. But anyway, check out my MySpace. I'm on myspace.com/Charles Fortius. Bye.
Was he running on a treadmill?
I think so. There was a lot of excitement and energy. In this. I mean, that's what I do at the gym. I start calling in listener lines. I just thought the enthusiasm was
that's good.
Was hilarious. So those were the calls for this week. And except we do have one more I'll play in a bit. But
the jitterbug, is that what you got bit by?
Jitterbugs, yeah, that's what she said.
She sounds like the musical version of like a method actor. She like wanted to get into the zone.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Chris, have you ever had someone call in absent on an important gig?
No, not at like the last minute. I mean, I've had someone call like a week before and say, "Oh, I probably can't do it," and I'll just find someone else to do it. But
that would be pretty frustrating.
No last minute bails.
And the guy who mentioned not treating anything as a scratch track, I kind of learned my lesson with that as I ended up going back and going, all these scratch tracks were better performances, and I didn't spend as much time getting the sounds on those and ended up using those. But I have one more phone call, and this is from someone who called in with a tip, so I thought I'd keep it separate because it was a good tip. And then I have an email that was also a tip, so I grouped them together. So here we go.
Hi there, this is Matthew Ebel from MatthewEbel.com, and I just got done listening to episode number 39, where you had mentioned that many bands, when they're signing up for a service online or describing themselves, will list bands that they think they sound like or they wish they sound like instead of bands they actually sound like. Before Pandora existed, something that I would do is go to the iTunes Music Store and other sites like that and see who else is buying my music, see what other artists they're actually buying. So if I see that somebody who bought, let's say, Goodbye Planet Earth or Beer and Coffee also bought a Dave Matthews album, then I'm going to list that I sound like Dave Matthews, because if people are searching for Dave Matthews and they find my music, well, according to iTunes, they're more likely to buy my music. So I don't know if that tactic actually works or not, but it seems like a good jumping off point. I could be full of crap. I don't know. Feel free to drop me an email and tell me your thoughts at MatthewEbel.com/contact, and hopefully I'll hear from you soon. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for that tip, Matthew. And Matthew did something that I would say I can't remember anyone doing on our listener line before, and he called in with a comment about a specific episode he'd been listening to, and I immediately put it on the show. I got that minutes before we started doing this. And so that's a little tip. If you want to get on the podcast, get a little free promo there. He got a little free, got his email and web address out there. Make a relevant comment.
Keep the conversation going.
That's right. But I also had another little tip that I thought was good that we got by an artist through email. Goes by the name of Mr. Billy.
Mr. Billy. He's a big CD Baby fan.
Yes, he is. And his tip was, and I thought it was a good one, he was telling this story about how he was at the mall. I don't know if, obviously it wasn't this year. I don't know if it was last year, but he was at the mall and saw the Santa Claus there. And every person that was getting their picture taken with Santa Claus got a free gift. And he thought, I wonder what they give out as a gift. So he went and talked to the people, and he convinced them to give out his new Christmas album as the free gift.
My gosh.
And they actually bought a bunch of copies. I think it was several thousand that he said, in order to give out as the free gift.
What?
And so I thought that was a great idea.
That is a great idea.
So
Genius.
you never know. It's not just marketing to people that are obvious music buyers or whatever, trying to get your placements on iTunes, your music in, or MySpace where people see you, or there's places in the real world where people interact with music.
And Mr. Billy, he does kids' music too, so it's, it might not...
it was a kids' Christmas album,
right.
so... But still, if you've got a family-friendly Christmas album,
Yeah.
those are kind of things where you can think outside of the box. And I think the Christmas season, especially with Christmas music, there's more opportunities to do that kind of thing. But yeah, it was just a good little lesson how he was, just walking through the mall and noticed that, hey, they're giving away something. Why can't it be my music? So, and it all worked out.
Seizing the day.
And again, I'll mention it one last time. Our listener line is 206-426-5683. So call anytime. Well, that's going to bring us to the end of this episode, last episode of the year 2008.
We're going strong into 2009.
That's right. Anyone have any hopes and dreams for the new year?
Well, I plan on doing some performances. I haven't performed in over a year, so my goal is to get out there and dust off the guitar and start playing some shows.
Speaking of, I have been working on a band project with a couple people for way too long, but we actually started performing and have a gig this weekend, and I wasn't going to tell people about it, but I thought, hey, why don't we involve them in the process? And Peter, who does the Music Discovery podcast, is also in the band with me, so we're going to actually do a podcast outside of CD Baby, kind of chronicling the progression of this band.
And this is proof that not only are we Men's Hair Club presidents, we are also members.
That's right, because I was thinking this last week, I should probably take some of my own advice. And so we just put up some crappy demos of the song. The songs aren't crappy, but the sound quality is bad. There's mistakes in there. But we're like, we're going to involve people on this process. So if you want to check that out and friend us, myspace.com/HelloMorningBand. All right, well, we hope everyone has a good holiday break, good new year, and we'll catch you next year.
Bye.
Peace. You've been listening to the CD Baby DIY Musician Podcast, broadcasting from Portland, Oregon, USA.